Okay, so I'm going to do a series of videos here that basically walk through an entire kind of project. It's not going to be a big project. I think I'm going to do like a 500 or under square foot little house. But we're going to go through the walls, tool, windows, doors, creating custom like cabinetry and stuff on the inside, doing a bunch of kind of custom components and stuff like that. But I'm also going to kind of go through I don't really have a design figured out just yet, so I'm going to kind of go through the design process as well and how I kind of operate in terms of working out space and ways of just kind of laying things out and working kind of quickly through something. So first things first, this is Revit 2018. If you create a new project with the architectural template, this is kind of what you start with. You don't have a lot of room here. These carrots here, these are your elevation markers. So if you get beyond here, this is going to read as a section rather than an elevation, and we don't want that. So basically they give you, let's see, in between here, like 130 feet, which is fine. That's usually enough, but I like to kind of get those out of the way. That way they're nowhere near where I'm actually working. And if I get them pointing far enough away, if I double click on my scroll wheel, it's going to zoom to fit. But if my project is only, say, yay big in between there, I don't want to zoom to fit all the way out here. I want to zoom to fit on that. So once I have my elevation markers out of the way, I'm going to just take these and hit hide category. So I know I want to operate somewhere in this space here. So first things first, I'm going to kind of lay out a little bit of kind of a design, a little bit of like a floor plan layout here. Before I get into any of the tools, what I like to do is use just kind of detail lines, and those are under annotate, and there's detail line right here. I like to use these just because they're a quick, almost kind of CAD version of working things out and kind of laying out space really quickly. And I can throw in, lines of countertops and appliances and stuff like that using all the same tool rather than flipping between tools really quick. I can kind of work all of that out using these really quickly. So I'm going to grab this. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to end up getting rid of them all eventually anyway. So I'm going to, thin lines is fine for now. So I'm going to start with kind of a kitchen layout. So I'll have a little bit of a galley kitchen. So my cabinetry will be 2 feet. So there's a wall there and maybe an exterior wall here. I'm going to need, let's see if I grab this and pull this up a little bit. And the hotkey for detail line, if you hover over this and you see where it says detail line and DL in parentheses, the DL is your hotkey. So I'm going to hit DL and grab that. I'm going to give myself about 3.5 feet of walkway here. So there's 3 feet there. Then I'll do my refrigerator. I'll do a standard kind of 3-foot refrigerator. Usually we'll do a counter depth, so it'll be about 2'3" deep. We want to give ourselves a little bit more room because we don't want to slam it right up against there. Otherwise, when the door opens, it's going to bind on the edge there. So we'll give ourselves 3 foot, an extra 3.5 inches. So then I'll have my 2-foot cabinetry. Maybe I'll give myself a 2-foot countertop. And then I'll have my 30-inch, whoops, wrong hotkey, 30-inch range. So this will be my range. And then I'll mirror over another 2-foot countertop. And that'll be my basic kitchen layout. This side will come all the way down to match that. And I'll end up with my sink centered on that. So I'll have my sink on this side. I've got my refrigerator, my range, some counter space. That should work just fine for what I'm doing. I can put my dishwasher and stuff like that next to my sink. So as far as kitchen layout goes, that should work pretty well. We'll say I've got a 3.5-inch stud wall with drywall on either side, so I end up with a wall there. Then I'll end up with a 5-foot bathroom. So I'll do a 3-foot shower, another 3 feet for my toilet to sit, and then I'll have a 2-foot vanity and something like somewhere in there, and then I'll have my other wall here. So then I get 4.5 inches for my wall. Since this is a plumbing wall, let's go ahead and move this out. We'll get this to be a 2x6 wall, so we'll move this out 2 inches. Whoops, didn't grab all of that. There we go. So I'll grab all of that and move that out 2 inches. And basically what I did right there is I just used the hotkey for move, which is M and V together. So that's how I move that. So that gives me my 6.5 inches for my 2x6 wall. That ends me with a 3'5" vanity. That should be fine if this is my only bathroom. And we'll say that works for that little section. And then maybe I'll do like a lofted bedroom over this entire space. So I'll end up with basically 13'3" by like 9'9". There, that's a decent size for a tiny house. That should work just fine. Let's see. Little details that we might want to add if we want to make this thing look kind of cool on the inside. Maybe the entry to the kitchen is kind of neat. Maybe we'll do something where we'll add some columns with like an arch or something like that over top of it here. So this will be arched coming into the kitchen there, just to kind of call it out as something kind of cool. Let's see what else we'll do. We'll have a little countertop run here for a little eat-in sort of area, so we'll leave ourselves like maybe 3 feet there. 3 foot for our little walkway and area for our chair to sit. And if we have a table, that maybe in these small houses a lot of times you want to conserve space as much as possible, so maybe we'll have a little area here where a table kind of folds down against the against some cabinets that are along here, some storage, and then it can be folded out and the chairs can sit around the table, something like that. If that's the case, we're going to have a 3-foot countertop, so this table can only be like maybe 2'10" if it's going to fold down, and we'll end up with like maybe a 2'6" table there, and we end up with, what was it, 3 feet on this side, so let's join that, and we'll add 3 feet to this side. So we get something like that. So there's our little area there. So we've got a kind of eat-in area. We got our kitchen. We got our bath. We're gonna need a living space. Let's say our front door kind of sits somewhere in here. That won't be too bad. This isn't going to be out all the time, so that won't really get in the way. We'll have a little area over here. Let's see. We're gonna need a little place for like water heater and stuff like that. So maybe we'll add a little closet back over this way, and then we'll move around this way to our kind of living space. how this living space lays out, we'll kind of figure that out kind of as we go. Maybe we'll move this down a little bit. What does that give us? Like 10'9". Maybe we'll do a little bit bigger than that. Let's see. Maybe we'll go like 12 foot here. So if we go to 12 feet there, give ourselves a little bit more room. And that should work just fine. And then off to this side, maybe we don't need it to be quite that wide. 12 by 12. Yeah, 12 by 12 is not too bad. We'll do something kind of like that. And then maybe we'll do a fireplace over here on this wall. And we could do, our seating arrangement could be couch, chair around here, TV above the fireplace. This is our main door. Maybe we'll get a window here. If we have room, maybe we'll stick a couple windows on either side of the fireplace. We'll get a little covered entry as you walk in there. And then going up to the lofted space up above, we'll get a ladder in maybe right here. That'll take you up to the second space. Yeah, I know the ladder's not to code, but that's fine. This is all for fun and games. So that'll kind of be our working sort of plan there. So that kind of gives me a good idea of space. Sure, I'm going to go ahead and kind of move some things around and kind of play with things a little bit as I go and get things in there, but that's just kind of the nature of it. So this is at least a decent start to kind of how this is all going to lay out. So this first video we're going to go into kind of setting up our walls and setting up levels and all of that sort of stuff. So first things first, I'm going to go to one of my elevations here, and I've got 2 levels already in here, level 1, level 2. So those are super generic, and only having 2 levels is all well and good, but we're probably going to need quite a bit more than that. So this being a small house, we're going to add a couple levels here, and then we'll figure out exactly what they end up being. So we're going to need a roof level. This one will be the ceiling level of the first floor. We will probably need, I'm going to put this on like a crawl space. That way I've got a little bit of storage underneath the house. So I'll do top of foundation there, and then like the top of my footer. So I can come in here, and if these get too close together, you can go ahead and click the little kind of lightning bolt symbol there, and it'll drop them down. You can also use these little toggles here to kind of move these around and adjust how you want these to kind of position themselves around the other text and stuff if things get a little too close. I'm going to change this scale from 1/8 inch. I'm going to just bump it up to 1/4 inch. That way I don't have to really worry about stuff getting in. And especially with a small house like this, 1/4 inch should be fine for elevations and all of that sort of stuff. So I'm going to say that my ceiling height for level 1 is going to be 8 foot. So once I have my kind of 8 foot figured out and know where I'm going there, my floor system, since I'm not going to have too much space there, I'll just go ahead and make this a bearing point here. I can span across here, which is basically going to be about 10 foot, something like that in span. So I can probably get away with, let's see, if I've got a 1/2 inch of drywall, 3/4 in my subfloor, that's 1 1.25 inches. I can get away with making this, we'll make this 8 foot, say 11.5 inches. So basically what that'll end up being is I'll have a 1/2 inch of drywall. That'll go here. I'll have my 3/4 of subfloor there, and then I'll have 10.25 inches in between there for my joists. So that should work out just fine there. Maybe we'll conventionally frame this. If we conventionally frame this, maybe we make this like a 2 by, and you're only spanning like 10 feet, so 2 by 10s would work. So 9 1/4 rather than 10 1/4, so we'll make this 8 foot 10 1/2. Yeah. So we'll just conventionally frame the second floor there. Okay, so then we've got our level 1. This we're going to have some larger spans. We might have some that span this way, but there's not really a good breaking point here. So this might all span this direction, this might all span this direction. Or vice versa. It just kind of depends on how this all ends up laying out. So we'll probably use something like a TJI for that. So if we've got our 3/4 subfloor, we'll probably have something like an 11 7/8 floor system, and then there's nothing underneath that because it's just a crawl space. So if we move this up, so now I'm down 1 foot 0 5/8, which should work just fine. Alright, so then that will be basically, so I've got my, then I'll have my plate that the thing actually sits on, and then I'll have to go down at least 8 inches for grade. So I need another level here. So if I throw in another level, and then move this up to there. That way we can see that. I'll rename this grade. Do I want to rename the corresponding views? Basically what that means is over here in my floor plans, in my project browser, do I want that to be called grade? And yes, I do. So then this is level 1. Whoops, I actually have that already figured. So that's grade. This is going to be, I'm going to actually move this down 1.5 inches, even though my floor system is going to be there. This is going to be top of foundation. Top of foundation. And then I've got to be at least 30 inches below grade, so I can just grab this and say 30 inches below grade. That's where I'm at, is there, depending on where you plan on designing your small house, that might change just based on code purposes and stuff like that. Let's move this out of the way real quick so I can hit this one. There we go. Okay, so now we can see everything. So now I know this is going to be, level 6 will be top of footer. We'll rename that one. Not that we'll be using that a whole lot, but for our elevation purposes, we want all of these to be labeled correctly. And see, we'll say this is level 1 ceiling. Yes, level 2. This will be level 2 ceiling. Whoops, grabbed the wrong thing. I want to rename this. Level 2 ceiling. There we go. Okay, so now we've kind of got some levels set up here. We're going to want this to be, let's see, our second floor. This is going to be another 8 feet, so we'll punch in 8 feet there, and it'll automatically tell us where level 2 ceiling is. So now that we have a lot of our levels set up, we might set up another level here or there. Just kind of depends on what wall section, stuff like that ends up being. If we need other levels, we can go ahead and put those in. But these will be our main ones to start with. This will give us a spot to at least start kind of putting walls in and working with that. So we're going to go to our level 1. That we've got our sketch kind of laid out here. So I'm going to go up to the walls tool, and there's a whole bunch of walls already kind of built in here. I don't like to use any of the pre-built stuff. I like to just kind of make my own. That way I basically know how all the layers are built, kind of how the wall is working and all of that sort of stuff. So if I start with a generic 8-inch, that's fine. These are great for remodeling and stuff like that. If you know the thickness of a wall, but you don't know necessarily what it's made up of, especially in old buildings where you have like plaster on lath and stuff like that. Who knows how thick that plaster is actually going to be? So you can do a generic wall that's a certain thickness to show, I don't really know what this wall is comprised of, but I do know that it's 8 inches thick. Those can be handy in those situations, but for new construction stuff, I like to kind of build my own, just to kind of have a handle on what everything that's going into my project. I want to know kind of what it is. So I'm going to hit duplicate here, and basically what duplicate is it'll take the generic 8-inch wall and it will create a new wall that looks the exact same as the generic 8-inch. The reason I hit duplicate is I don't want to change the original. I want to create a new one that I can modify without getting rid of that original generic 8-inch. So I'm going to put a dash in front and call this stone exterior wall. In actual practice, you'll have you usually have a naming convention or something that will tell you what the wall's makeup is and all of that. For what I'm doing here, this is a pretty small house. I'm not going to have very many exterior walls, so maybe I'll start with exterior, so it'll sort by exterior and then stone wall. And if I have a couple of exterior walls, it's not going to be too cumbersome for me to look through like 3 walls and figure out which one it is. In a huge project, you might have a whole bunch of them, and you're going to want some other naming convention to kind of sort through and figure out what stuff's going on there. The reason I put a dash is if I put a dash in front of it, it will automatically sort it to the top, and I want anything that I create to sort to the top of the list. That way I'm not floundering around looking through all the preset stuff to figure out which one is mine. I want to just be able to go to the very top and say, okay, these are the walls that I've created. So I have exterior stone wall, and basically what I have here is a bunch of options that go with that wall, as well as under my properties tab over here, I have a whole bunch of options as well. These we'll get into once I kind of create this wall and start modeling. These have more of an impact on kind of drawing things out. So I have wrapping and inserts, wrapping and ends. I'm not going to mess with those right now. We might get into those a little bit later. But basically, what do you want it to do when you have like a window or the wall just ends? Do you want the exterior finish or the interior finish to wrap around? Do you want, at the windows, do you want the exterior to wrap to the window or the interior to wrap to the window, or do you want both? So little things like that can come into play as you get into the model a little bit more. But right now, what we're really concerned about is this structure tab. Down here is basically just a bunch of notes and things like that that you can put into schedules and things like that. But if we get back into the structure tab, we can see that all it is structure 8 inches thick. So that is basically the makeup of the generic wall. So we want our exterior walls to be 2x6s, so we'll say, okay, we're good there. And that's the structure of our wall. We will say that our exterior, we'll go ahead and say that the exterior of our thing will insert a couple layers here because we're going to need them. We'll say the finish level 1, finish number 1, and you can see here it says this is the exterior side, so this is the exterior side, down here is the interior side, so we'll say 4 inches of stone. I'm going to go ahead and throw a stone texture on here, so I'm going to come into the material editor, and down here I'm going to hit create new material. And it's going to create a default new material, which I will rename and call stone. and I put the dash so it sorts it to the very top, just like the walls. And I'm not going to get into the appearance or anything like that yet. I'll deal with that later, but for now, as I'm building the wall, at least I've got my stone texture kind of applied there. Then I'm going to end up with an air layer. We'll make that an inch. We're probably going to end up with a 12-inch thick foundation to support all of this. Let's add our 1/2-inch drywall on the inside down here, and we'll say that's finished too. You can see up here this total thickness. It's telling me that it's 11 inches thick right now. So I want to kind of keep an eye on that to make sure I'm not getting too far, going too crazy and getting this thing too thick for my 12-inch foundation wall. So I've got a 1-inch air gap there. I'll have a 3/4 inch substrate, so basically my OSB on the outside, or your zip system, or whatever it happens to be, for your sheathing that goes on the exterior there. So I'm at 11 3/4 thick there, which is pretty good. That should work out pretty well. I got my 5.5. It looks like I've got all of my layers there, and then in between my thermal layer and my substrate would be where all of my sort of control layers, my vapor barrier, all of that sort of stuff would kind of reside in there. The structure here, something that we might want to do, and I'll show you how this draws out and then we'll come back to this, is put in kind of a poche pattern, so that way when we draw our walls, it ends up kind of pocheing those as like a dark gray or a black or something like that, so the walls kind of jump out from cabinetry and all the other lines that will be in the model. So that looks pretty good for now. That's a decent start. So we'll say OK, and we'll say OK. Now, if I want to start drawing my walls here, if I just draw this in, see how it's just a big thick mass. There's really no layers showing up to it. The reason for that is, I'm going to go ahead and change this to 1/4 inch as well. This little section down here is detail level coarse. I'm going to change that to fine. And now I can see all the layers of my wall here. I see my 1/2-inch drywall, my stud, my sheathing, my air layer, and my stone on the outside. So that's all well and good. Now I can see that the exterior is this side, the interior is that side. That's handy to have. But I don't want to, I've got my wall, all these interior dimensions set up. I don't want to kind of impede on them. I have this all kind of laid out the way I want. I want to be able to draw my walls in such a way that the interior finish ends up right along that wall. So to do that, I have this location line. I can change that to finish face interior. So I can change it here, or I can change it here. Either way, it's going to keep that as a as kind of a property of this wall. So now when I click and drag here, if I go this way, I'm going to end up inside of it. If I go this way, I'm on the outside. So now I can go ahead and draw the exterior kind of face here, and we'll just go all the way around. We haven't really figured out the fireplace yet, but we will probably end up with a different wall that goes around there. But for now, we'll go ahead and kind of wrap this entire thing. This is going to be an interior wall. We'll just jump that over to there. Okay. So now in looking at this being offset from this probably doesn't work real well. So I want to go ahead and bump this over here. So I'm going to line this wall up with this wall. And to do that, I'm going to use, under Modify, the Align tool. And you can prefer wall center lines, wall faces. Wall faces is fine. So if I click the very edge of the drywall here, and click the very edge of the drywall here, it's going to jump that over. So if there's a little offset here, that's all fine. Not a big deal. We'll just adjust our closet and stuff like that accordingly once we get into this. So as you can see, this doesn't read real well. We've got all these lines and the difference between the exterior wall and the kind of cabinet lines and stuff like that at first glance doesn't really jump off the page real well. So we're going to add that poche that I talked about. So if we go back in, we select our wall, we go to edit type and structure here. Under this layer 5, our structure, we're going to come in and grab this and we'll create a new material, and I'm going to rename it and call it Poche. And we're never going to see it as a surface pattern because it's inside the wall. We'll always have our drywall on one side, we'll have our stone on the other, but we are cutting through this wall. So whenever you're cutting through that layer, I want it to read as a solid fill, and this color works decently. It's just this default dark gray color that's right there. So we'll hit OK, 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 and now it poches all those walls. So now that's starting to read much clearer in terms of just the overall aesthetic of kind of how this lays out. So now we'll do a couple interior walls here. We basically just have this one and this one. So if I go to wall, and I'll start with a generic 5-inch, duplicate this, and dash interior, we'll call this 3.5-inch stud. Edit type, we'll change this to 3.5 inches. We're going to poche that as well. So we'll select our material there, insert layers that we can place up and down, make them both 1/2-inch drywall, and we'll say finish layers. There. Okay, and I haven't applied finishes to these because I haven't really decided what those are going to be. Are they going to be, maybe this ends up not being a 1/2-inch thick, maybe this ends up being, like barnwood siding or something like that. So I'm kind of leaving that open to interpretation for right now. So I've got my 3.5-inch stud. I've created that one. I'm just going to go ahead before I get out of this, duplicate it, and say 5.5-inch stud as well. And we'll just change this to 5.5. Say OK, OK. So now I've got my 5.5. I'm going to change this to finish face, and I'm going to draw that one through, and then I'll change this to 3.5, and we'll grab this one. Okay, so now that I've got that all set up, I've got my exterior walls in here. I don't really need these lines anymore. These were kind of just my default to start lines, so I can kind of go through and start to delete all of these. If you want to grab a bunch at once, you can hover over the line and hit tab. It'll grab an entire chain of them. So you can see I grabbed this entire run here. So I grabbed all that, I'll grab that, and I believe that should take care of all of them. Okay, so now we've got our basic layout to start with here. Now we want to make sure that all this is set up correctly. So if I go to my elevation here, you can see my walls are just sticking way up into space. So that's because I'm starting at level 1 here, and I'm going up to an unconnected height that is specified at 20 feet here as default. I don't want this to go all the way up. I want this to go up to a certain level. So if I'm looking at the exterior of this, so this basically what I'm looking at, so this is our little bump out, this would be our front door, our fireplace, our kitchen, and our bathroom over here. I think what I'm going to do, just design wise, I'm going to make, so I'll have a gable coming across this way. I'm going to pop this one up a little bit since this is the 2-story element, and do a gable this direction. There might be a gable on the front of this little guy here, but I'll make the big tall portion stone, and then maybe I'll have a smaller band of stone that runs around this entire section, and we'll do some like stucco finish or something like that above, running around there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set these walls up to my second floor ceiling, and I'm going to set all of these to my first floor ceiling. So that way I've kind of got this tiered effect here. Now I know I'm going to end up having to get into this second one with this ladder that comes up, so this might end up being a vaulted space or something like that where the ladder comes up at the peak to get in there. But right now that looks pretty good. I probably want this to be a little bit lower just because of where I might have this run right along windowsill height. So if that's the case, I want this to be, I'm going to do an unconnected, and I'm going to say this goes up to, maybe my sill height is like, well, I've got that one set of cabinets that runs here, right along here, so I'm going to call this 3 foot. Okay, so I've got my 3 foot there. That should work pretty well. Now I need to build a wall that goes on top of this. So there are 2 ways that you can go about doing something like this, where you have a different material down below and then another material up above. You can do it using what is called a stacked wall. So down here there's a stacked wall option, where if you go into the structure of it, it basically takes 2 other wall types that were in this list and then says, okay, that's the one, that's the other one. What's the height of the one on the bottom? The one on the top is the one that varies in height. And then what is the offset between the 2? So if I preview these, you can kind of see how this is set up, where you've got this could be like the stone wall, this could be the stucco wall up above, and how that all works together. The only issue that I have found in using these is if your foundation steps, this cannot step. So if all of a sudden this is 3 feet and then you need it to drop down like maybe a foot because of grade change or something like that, then the top of it is also going to drop. And to avoid that, you have to create another wall type, another stacked wall type, and adjust that height and everything. So that can be a little obnoxious and get to be real cumbersome in terms of how many wall types you've got in your kind of drop down here, especially when you're stepping, maybe you have a walkout basement or something like that. That gets real cumbersome because every time it steps, you've got to create another wall type, and it's another thing in your list. So I prefer to do it a slightly different way. I prefer to basically create a stacked wall without using the stacked wall kind of tool here. So what I will do is I will go back into my level 1 plan here, and you'll see this isn't pocheted anymore. The reason for that being we are not cutting through that wall anymore. Our cut plane is at 4 foot. So because these walls go up higher than 4 foot, we're cutting through those. And looking at our interior walls here real quick, just to make sure, these are going up to level 1 ceiling, which is good. Same thing here, so those are set appropriately. So I'm going to build our wall here for our kind of stucco up above. So if I create my wall, I'm going to use my exterior stone wall as a template, and I will duplicate that and exterior stucco wall. And we'll say okay. So I've got the same kind of system. I've got my 5.5 inch stud, my 1/2 inch drywall on the inside, my 3/4 here. I'll delete my stone. I'm going to have 1 inch of stucco, like a scratch layer and all of that. So I've got 1 inch there, and then I'm going to put that on top of another inch of we'll do some exterior insulation just to help a little bit. It won't go all the way down through the stone layer, but that'll at least help help at least a little bit. And it'll also give us a subsurface to put our stucco and that sort of stuff on. Not something that you would typically do, but any insulation can help. It'll also give us a little bit better offset for our sill and that sort of stuff, because our other walls like 11.5, something like that. So we don't want that offset to be too enormous there for a sill. So I've got my 1-inch kind of stucco finish here. I'll apply a stucco finish. Let's create a new material. I'll call that stucco. And we'll make that have a surface pattern. That should be fine. And we're going to make it real light. We don't want it to be too in your face. We'll say OK. OK. Now, I still want my location line to be finish face interior. That way I can make sure that all of this is going to line up. So if I start down here and I start clicking my way around this edge here, it's going to give me error messages because I'm building on top of another wall. It's basically telling me, hey, you've got 2 walls on top of each other right now, which is fine. That doesn't bother me at the moment, so I'm not going to worry about it. And then we'll go all the way around here. Okay, so I have this going all the way around. I'm going to go ahead and modify this joint. So if I use this modified joint, see how this is coming through here? I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to go through, cycle through, and it's not giving me the joint I want, probably because I'm on top of the other wall. So if I grab all of these and say, okay, I'm going to take all of these walls, and these are going to go up to, we'll make these go up to level 1 ceiling to start with, and the base is going to offset 3 feet. So now you can see it cleaned up that joint because of the because I got off of the other wall there. So that cleans that up a little bit. Now you can see how this sits on top of there. So that's looking pretty good there so far. Now, what I'm going to do, if I change this to 1/2 inch, my hatch pattern is going to get a little bit finer. That'll look a little bit better as we're working through this. So I've got some walls set up here, but if I have to move one of these, I want the other one to move with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the align tool. And if I have modify, align, I can hit, you can hover over it and see exterior stucco wall, so I know I've got my exterior stucco wall. And then there is exterior stone wall. So if I hit align, now you see this little lock just popped up? Now if I click that lock, it will always keep that surface aligned. And that's what I want. So that way if I move this stucco wall, adjust it at all as I'm detailing out the inside, it will automatically move the stone wall as well. So I'm just going to go around and grab all of these and align everything together and lock them. That way I know that all of that is going to work exactly how I want it to in the future. The only way that I could possibly move these independently now is if I click that lock off. Then it wouldn't work. So now you can see this is my stone wall below, this is my stucco wall above. If I click and drag this, both of them move. And that's what I'm after. I want both of those to work together basically as one stacked wall. So now I basically have a stacked wall just like that, the pre-built stacked wall that they have at the bottom here. I basically have that exact system, only now I can control all of these independently. I can control this wall. If I wanted this one to go down, 2 feet, I can do that. well, it dropped 2 feet, but the only reason that it didn't fill in is because its unconnected height is 3 foot. So I could make this, if I wanted it to be 5 foot, now I make it 5 foot and it jumps back up there. I can also edit the profile of this and create the step that I want out of it and get all of that to work exactly how I want. So I prefer this method because then I can control the 2 different walls independently and kind of make those work for me. So I've got these kind of set up. I've got what I want as far as a look and everything going. Let's make the fireplace actually stone all the way up. So we'll make this like 15 feet tall that'll be our fireplace for now. So that works pretty well. It would be nice if I could get a sill that runs around here. That would work for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to go into my exterior stone wall type and I'm going to duplicate this, and I'll show you why here in a second. Exterior stone wall, and I'm going to put a dash with sill. So I have this preview here of how this wall looks, and if I go under the structure, down here at the bottom I have a bunch of options here. If I don't have the preview open, they're all grayed out. So if you open the preview, all of these become options. So I can create a sweep here and say load profile, and if I go to profiles, maybe I want something wall profile, brick soldier, of course. There's a precast sill. There's a parapet precast. All of these are all well and good, but the odds of them actually being the size that we want aren't great. So what we're going to do is we're going to make our own here real quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to File, New, Family. And I'm going to come down to Profile. I'll say Profile, Open. So now I have this horizontal and vertical kind of crosshatch here, and this is the center point of this family here. So under Create, I just have lines, and all I'm going to do is draw in. I'm going to make my sill 3 inches thick, and I'm going to make the front edge, we'll say 2 inches. And we'll say it's basically going to look like that. It's basically just going to be a stone sill, real simple, and maybe we'll actually give it a little drip edge on the edge here. So we'll do a little 1/4 inch drip round on it as well. And I'm going to split that line with the split tool. So under modify, there's split, hotkey SL, and split that and give that a little option here. So I want to make sure that this distance is going to actually work for my wall, so that when I do a wall section, it's actually going to read correctly. To flip back and forth between windows, you can do this, and every window you have opened will be there behind you. I prefer to use Control Tab. If you hit Control Tab, it'll take you to the last window you have open, which is kind of nice. So I'm going to look at this and say, okay, I want my sill to sit somewhere back in here. So I'm going to end up with a sill. So there's 5 inches. If I end up with, say, a 7, so 5, let's say it overhangs 1.5 inches. So that'll be a 6.5 inch sill. So I'll flip between all these views. Now I want this to be 6.5. So let's move this back 1/2 inch. And we'll say there we go. So there's our 6.5 inch sill. Should be in good shape. I think that should work. So we'll say File, Save As, Family, and I'm going to put it in the Imperial Library. I'm going to go under Profiles, Wall, and we'll say Stone Sill 6.5 inches. Whoops. Can't use the inch symbol, but 6.5 should work. Oh, it doesn't like that. So, sill 6.5. There we go. And I'll hit load into project. So it's loaded in here. I'm going to go to my wall here, duplicate again, say with sill, come back to our structure, sweep, load profile, profiles, wall, and I just find it in here. It's already loaded in here because when I came in I hit load into project. So I'll hit add, profile I want is sill 6.5, material, I'm going to create a new material and just call it stone sill. Okay. And side, I want it on the exterior side. It's going to cut the wall, and I definitely want it to be cuttable. So that way, if I put doors and stuff like that in there, it will break the actual sill. So hit apply. So it's sitting down here at the very base of the wall. If I flip it, it can flip it vertical. I don't want to flip it. I'll flip that back. So I can set it, do I want it from the base of the wall or do I want it from the top of the wall? If I'm going to adjust, if I might have to adjust the bottom of my wall for grade and stuff like that, I know the top of my wall is always going to stay level all the way across. So I'm going to say I want it at the very top of my wall. And I'm going to have it sit just like that. And if I zoom in here on this, you can see my cap here. And I'll go sweep. And I want this to offset 5 inches. Say apply. Whoops. Other way. Negative. So we'll hit apply. So now my stone sill sits back in here. And that should work pretty well. So I'll hit OK. 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 And now I've got this little sill that sits around here. So if I grab all of my walls, all these stone walls that I want to have a sill on them, and this is just the same wall as I had before, I'm just going to change this to with sill. Now that sill pops up all the way around there. So if I go to realistic mode, you can kind of see all of that sitting there. So that works pretty well. The only issue that looks like I might have is because this is sitting on top of that. This is going to my stucco is going to sit on top of that sill. I'm going to have to do some sort of detail along there just to get that line to kind of pop a little bit. But otherwise, it looks like it's reading pretty well there. So now I've created a few custom walls. I've created ones with sweeps. I've shown you a couple stacked walls, how to align those and lock them in place. I've got stucco. I've got some other walls, some interior walls and that sort of stuff. And for the most part, I have my walls and a general layout pretty well started here. So for now, I think that's a pretty good start for our tiny house here. One thing to quick check, if I know I want this to be about 500 square feet, I'm going to say if I hit this room here and here, and I grab this, maybe I want this to show area as well. Okay, so I've got 344 square feet in this space and 47 in that. So I'm at about 390, and I'm going to end up with another up above here, another like 13, we'll say 13 by 10, so another 130 square feet there. So yeah, it'll be about 520, something like that. That's pretty good. But it'll be just big enough for us to get everything that we really want in here. without it getting kind of too crazy. So I'll delete both of these just to get them out of my way. Okay, so I think that's a good kind of stopping place for walls and kind of how I go about at least starting a project and getting ideas down and that sort of thing. So next we'll be getting into windows and doors and the properties that associate with those.